Nicole Mitchell was a high school teacher, pastor, and now porn star. Welcome everyone to Deep Drinks podcast. Today I have a very unique and special guest, Nicole Mitchell. You have seen Nicole on Dr. Phil, Jimmy Kimmel, Holly Randall Unfiltered, and many other places. Her story is inspiring and unique, but also contains elements common to many of us who grew up in a sexually prohibitive environment. Without spoiling too much, I would like to welcome the amazing Nicole Mitchell to Deep Drinks podcast. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, David.
So I first want to apologize formally because when we first organized to do this, you were one of the first guests that I had on, and I totally screwed up the dates, and you were ready to go, and I was in bed. And I woke up to the emails, and then I felt it was so embarrassing to me, but I'm so glad you gave me another chance. Thank you so much for coming on. I think about it every time I go to email a guest now of that time I screwed up. So thank you for giving me another chance.
You're so welcome. Thanks for being persistent. It pays off.
Well, so your story is just absolutely fascinating, and you've been on Dr. Phil to tell it, and you've been on many places, Holly Randall's amazing podcast Unfiltered, but I think I have a very unique kind of perspective because I kind of grew up I was a pastor as well. I grew up in very similar, I guess, environments. So I wanted to kind of get like a kind of a raw, unfiltered church perspective from you about your whole journey. But I would also like, to this just be a casual conversation between us. Like we are just catching up over some drinks, which brings me to ask the question, what are we drinking today?
I'm drinking electrolyte water.
Hey, and I'm drinking electrolyte water as well. I've got a Powerade here. And you know what? Originally we were doing coffee, but I was actually happy that you changed it because let me tell you, yesterday we had Dr. Kip Davis on, who's a Bible scholar, and he wanted to drink rye whiskey straight, and we drank a lot of rye whiskey, and I am hungover. So I need a little bit of electrolytes, I think.
That's amazing.
So I wanted to dive straight into your story, but I wanted to ask you a question. You've described your sexuality as healing and sacred. Has it always been that way?
Oh my gosh, I was so afraid of my sexuality growing up. I've been taught to fear my body, to fear pleasure, to fear anything related with sex, sexuality, sensuality. So my entire life I was afraid of it and try to suppress it because I was taught that was the right thing to do. And it was only until a few years ago that I started to return to my body and was wondering what is pleasure to me? What does feel good to me? Am I safe with my body? Am I safe with my pleasure? And I was pretty nervous going on that journey. And now being where I am today, it is the most beautiful, sacred thing in my life. And I'm so glad I returned home to my sexuality.
Returned home to your sexuality. That's an interesting way to put it. Obviously, you probably know, growing up in church, the story of the prodigal son, where you returns home after sinning. Do you ever feel? So you kind of flip on your head. You're saying, no, I've returned home from church. Like I've left that kind of environment. That's interesting. Okay, so what? So go into a little bit more detail. Like what kind of environment was it that you kind of grew up in when you were first? I guess when you were little, I guess when you were first coming into yourself, what kind of church, did you grow up in religious? Were your parents religious? Were you taught religious teachings? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, all the above. I was raised in a really religious, conservative home and community. I was raised Baptist and very quickly picked up on the messaging of where I belonged as a young girl and woman. I saw all the women in the nursery or in the kitchen. No women speaking, no women teaching, no women preaching. That was not acceptable. And so I very quickly tried to become that good girl. who they told me to be. And it was incredibly repressive, suppressive, and oppressive, where you were exactly who they told you to be. There was no room for your voice or your autonomy or your own agency. And I bought it all the way through. And I was like the poster child for purity culture throughout the 90s and even into the 2000s, trying to save myself for my husband. And when I did have sex before marriage, I felt horrible, and like a failure and tainted and ruined. And like, there's a lot of trauma that purity culture and just from my conservative religious upbringing had on me. But for most of my life, I tried to adhere to the dogma that was passed down to me.
Wow. Yeah. So I remember, I've asked my friends this myself. Like, I've asked my friends, like, when you're like a teenager and you're not like having sex, but you're like doing like hand stuff with people, like you kind of, everyone's running around fingering each other and stuff. Like when I first started doing that, I felt like tremendous amounts of guilt and shame, and just felt like I was doing something wrong. But I talk to my friends like now that I just thought everyone had that experience, but a lot of my other friends didn't have that experience at all. The ones that didn't kind of grow up in that environment. Did you like when you first like had sex, so it was outside of marriage? Was it like a huge amount of shame that came along with it? Like, what can you lead us down that path a little bit about like how, I guess, that first happened? Like, were you trying to stay pure until you're married and then you just kind of made a mistake, or did you get into a long-term relationship, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I just want to agree with your point that, exploring sexuality as a teenager is so normal and natural, and it's crazy that we shame it, and try to punish it or control it in the religious communities, at least in the ones that I grew up in. And so now that I have kids, I'm like, I'm actually excited for them to have the
Yeah.
freedom to explore when they're of age and not carry guilt and shame on into the years and adult years. But from a very young age, I was always very like sexual, and I always joked that I was one big hormone with two little feet running around. Like I just like was a horn dog. I was always horny. I was always turned on. I was always thinking about sex, and like everything they say about guys applied to me. Guys always think about sex. I'm like, well, I always think about sex. Guys are always horny. I was always horny. So there was no room for my experience as a woman, but I identified with a lot of these like descriptions of male habits or whatever. And I was so horny and I was so afraid, like, because if you plan on having sex with someone, that's like premeditation. That's like double the sin. Not only did you have sex, but you were planning on having sex. So unfortunately, my first sex was so anticlimactic. I'm like so embarrassed by it. I would almost say ashamed of it, but I see why I did it. It was with a guy I wasn't even attracted to. It was last second. It was in the backseat of his car. He did his 10 pumps and he was done inside of a condom. And that was it. But I felt a little bit freer because I didn't plan it. I didn't plan it. Like, so I felt like, oops, it happened. Oops, God, forgive me. But I still felt horrible versus planning it, talking it through. That would have added too much for my psyche to handle, to be that that complicit in my own sexuality.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm so embarrassed by that story. It is nothing glamorous.
Isn't it interesting that that I can totally, like, it's the difference between like murder versus premeditated murder. Like premeditated, it's like, okay, you're going to prison for longer. It's like, but it's funny that like you didn't have a chance to really consider consent. You didn't really have a chance to consider protection, probably. Like, it probably just like, do you know what I mean? There was a lot of things that will actually put you in a much more dangerous situation because you had this perspective.
If he had not worn a condom, I wouldn't have asked him. Because again, that's premeditation. That's you thinking through, do I want this person to do? And I didn't even know what consent was until I was 30 years old. I was 5 years into my then marriage, and I first learned about consent, and I was horrified. How can you live 30 years and be married and never know about consent? And then I was like outraged, and like, because at that point in my marriage, I never said no to my husband because I didn't know I was allowed to. And I felt so violated. Yeah, I felt so violated. And so I was like, that's it. My babies will know from the time they are fucking born that they like consent is a thing. And my kids are very, very aware. They're very like, I didn't say you could touch my body. Like if I like touch their shoulder, like, come on, honey. And they're like, Mom, I didn't say you could touch my shoulder. I'm like, you're right. Like they're so connected to their body, and no one gets to touch or interact with it without consent.
You're
Like that's
you're
how strong
making
embrace.
so many conservatives furious right now.
I know.
There's that idea, like you ask consent to like wipe your change your child's nappy and things like that. There's like that whole idea. And look, I know that the baby can't hear anything, and it's kind of like there's some, I guess, some silliness to it, but it also kind of makes sense in a little way because you're kind of prepping them for like, in a way that you're like, that you're showing them they have agency over their own body. There are no such thing as like that parents can just do whatever they want.
Yes, they're their own person. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to shout out Derek Lambert from Myth Vision. When I told him that I had you coming on, he was like I'm so jealous because he shot you an email a couple of emails apparently a year ago, and he just said then he just sent a super chat. Thank you, Derek. I loved her story and the fact that she's so transparent today. I'd love to interview her on Myth Vision. Myth Vision is a big channel, so I go. He's a great guy, great friend of mine. I'm sure that. Send another email. Send another email, Derek.
Another email. I had a lot going on a year ago.
But yeah, I bet you've had a lot going. You've done a lot of like big steps forward, even since I've been following you. Like, did you just recently release your first sex scene?
Yeah, re-released. I released it. I don't remember when I released it, maybe a year ago, but it was only one time. And now I'm like, I should re-release it. It's so good and it's so authentic. So I re-released it, and but because I have a bunch of new followers, so most people haven't seen it. And I'm like, everyone, you should see this.
Yeah, because I haven't subscribed to your OnlyFans or anything. I'm not that I'm against it or anything, but I've seen what you share on Twitter, and I like got that image that you sent where you're like, oh, I'm in my sex scene, and you like covered your nipples, whatever. And I was like, sent it to my buddies. It's like, check out my new guest for Deep Drinks. I'm like, no way, that's so cool. Yeah, because most of the people I have on are like, we're like, like Bible scholars and stuff, but it was just such a different transition. So jumping, like, so when it came to consent, I want to talk a little bit about that. Like, how did you not know about consent for the first 30 years of your life? Like that is, I mean, obviously there's a difference, I guess, between and you can talk as much or as little about this as you want, but there's a difference between like your husband saying we're having sex now and then you have to do it versus like just touching him when you don't want him to, and then you feel like you have to just let him touch you. And of course it goes both ways, but so can you explore a little bit for us how you didn't know about consent for the first 30 years of your life?
I think it's honestly part of the patriarchy and religious dogma. I think it's actually part of the plan. A great way to control an entire group of people is to teach them they don't have control over their body. So you literally do not teach them any concept of consent. And in fact, you go the other extreme and you teach them that they are responsible for what people do to them. So I was taught I was responsible for how men view me, how men think about me, and how men treat about me. Men were never given the responsibility. So I was always trying to cover up or apologize if they did something wrong to me. Like I would apologize for their harm. And so when you're constantly taught that, and I remember one time I was with this adult that I really respected, and I saw a funny shirt that said "Not tonight, honey," and I pointed to him like, "Oh, that's so funny." And she's like, "Oh, that doesn't matter. You give it when he wants it." Like little things like that, which maybe for most people, it was a blip on the screen. For me, that seared like, oh, okay. I guess whenever he wants it, I have to, okay. Good girl script, right? And then it wasn't until 5 years in my marriage, I was with I just made a bunch of new girlfriends and they're all married and they're saying how they say no to their husbands all the time. And I was like, you say no to your husbands? And they all looked at me horrified. Like, you don't say no? And I was too embarrassed to admit to what I was thinking is I didn't know I could say no. Like I thought it was like my biblical mandate to be a good wife. I always had to say yes. Granted, my ex-husband is a really good guy, good man, good heart, good energy. And I don't think he ever knowingly took advantage of me. But the fact that when he asked, no matter if I was angry, moody, frustrated, exhausted, overwhelmed, it was an instant yes, because I was taught that. And I just wish there had been conversation in our relationship of like, is this what you actually want? Like, how do you feel? Are you in the mood for this? Like, kind of like make it more equal instead of centered on one person.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I can totally understand that, and I think I interviewed Alyssa Whitbeck Alexander, and she's grew up in a really strict Mormon church. They didn't kiss, I don't think, before their wedding day. They didn't have sex before their wedding day. They got married in the temple. She'd never drunk coffee, like really, really, really strict. And on her honeymoon, she was Googling marital rape because she was being raped essentially. But in a weird way, this is going to sound horrible coming out of my mouth, but in a weird way, he didn't realize what he was doing either. Like they were so both sheltered in and not taught anything about sex at all that both of them had no idea that you could just that you couldn't just take what you wanted from the other person. And look, we're up to the section where I'm gonna do a little Bible reading on Deep Drink's podcast. So 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 3. The husband should fulfill his marital duties to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to the husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to the wife. Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So when I was a Christian, I read that and I was like, oh, that's kind of a nice system. Like you give each other the needs, but obviously there's a darker side to this scripture and how it's being used by people. So it makes me feel a bit cringe. So these are some of the things that you kind of like came up against when you became a pastor. So right. So when you became a pastor, it was a rebellious thing for you to do, to become a pastor, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, because women weren't allowed to be leaders. So for me to knowingly premeditate, actively choose to go on and become a leader within my church was seen as scandalous, rebellious, dangerous. And you can imagine if that's how my circle responded to me becoming a pastor, you can imagine how they responded to me going on to make porn. But yeah, oh my gosh, there I am. There she is.
I'm sorry to show you. I'm sorry to send you show this to you, show everyone. But I just wanted to show everyone that you were the real deal. You're preaching. Yeah. You're a pastor, and I have to say your message was kind of nice. Everyone's in, baby.
It was a good message. Everyone's in. I intentionally chose that passage. It's about a eunuch. I'd never been taught about this eunuch my entire life, and I was in the church 3 days a week. This eunuch who was the first person to be baptized into the Christian faith, and he was an outsider in every way. He was a eunuch. He was from a different land. And there's a third thing that excluded him from being part of the kingdom, but he was the first to be included. And so that sets a precedent that my precedent at preaching sermon was like, the very people that you think are excluded from the kingdom are probably the very ones who are in. So like rethink your religion, rethink your dogma, rethink your beliefs. So even though I cringe at my past life, I do feel really good about the message I taught that day.
Yeah, I like that you can see that you were a good person even back then. Like it had nothing to do with your religiosity or anything. Mm-hmm. So you went on to train. Did you training to be a pastor? Did you go to ministry college, or did you just get involved in leadership?
I just got involved in leadership at my church. For like 5 years, they mentored me into the position, and then it's during that time I applied to seminary, and then I went to seminary and got my degree afterwards.
Oh, really? So
yeah,
what degree do you have?
I just graduated from seminary in 2019. So it wasn't even that long ago. And then I started porn like a year later. It's just like life is so crazy. But
wow, wait. That is what? I didn't know that. That's crazy.
I know. Most people don't know I went to seminary so late or so recently. Yeah.
So what was your master's in?
I got it in social justice, actually. I was going to get my MDiv, which is a 4-year degree, Master of Divinity. But then halfway, like a year in, I was like burning out. I could tell I was kind of on the fumes of my faith, like the last remnants of it. And so I changed my degree to a master's in social justice because it was shorter. And I've always had a heart for social justice. And then I got out of there.
Well, so that's super interesting. I want to explore that more. Do you think that you were going... Well, first of all, Derek asked a great question as well. What do you label yourself today? Atheist, agnostic, theist? non-believer?
I would say spiritual. Um, it's so funny. I was talking to my partner. I was like, if people ask, I'd probably say agnostic. And he's like, I think you're more of a theist. I'm like, oh, something. Like, I hold it really loosely. I'm just like, whatever. I think there is something out there, but I could be wrong, is how I view it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that reason. So I'm just throwing a dart in the darkness here, but is that belief? Is that just more of like a feeling? Like, you don't. It's not like you've like looked at the arguments and rationalized the perspective of God. You've just
Totally.
yeah. You just have like you have
It's
a
a
sense that there
feeling.
must be something bigger.
Yeah, I feel like there's something bigger, whether it's God, whether it's love, whether it's my highest and best self. I have no idea. But I think with anyone who's gone through an extreme life change like I have, where you thought you had all the answers and now you think all of that was bullshit, I think it makes you hesitant to cling too tightly to any new belief. So I have my
Mm.
beliefs, but I hold loosely to them, because I'm like, if I was that wrong before, I could be wrong again, and I'm constantly learning and evolving. So I just hold loosely to what I believe now.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I've often said that. I think I said one time that I would do anything for God. I would murder my whole family if God told me to, right? Which is a very strong thing to say. And the only reason I said it, and this like freaked a lot of people, my friends out, but the only reason I said it is because they were asking me really like hard questions. So I just went to the most extreme thing I could think
The
of.
extreme. Yep.
Yeah, and of course, my perspective was God would never ask me to do that, and my perspective was, which is kind of untrue because he asked Abraham to kill his son, but God would never ask me to do that, and also I'd have to really know it's God. In which case, how could you deny God? Like, how could you deny God of anything? But so it scares me that I used to think that, and now I'm pretty confident in my unbelief. So it's like I don't. It's always like a little like don't be that confident because you once believed some pretty crazy stuff. So if always be willing to test, evaluate your beliefs, and things like that. Do you think?
Real quick, one of my course students said to me recently in one of my courses, and it really resonates. She said, and she quoted someone else, but the quote was something like, the older I get, the more I care about mystery rather than mastery. And that's how I feel. It's like the older I get, the more I lean into the mysterious, and it's not about mastering it like I used to.
That's cool. That's really cool. Do you think going to seminary was part of you trying to save your faith, or had your faith already started unraveling then, or when did it start unraveling?
I actually give credit to my seminary for helping me lose my faith. So I have wanted to go to seminary since I was in Bible college. I was already enrolled in seminary, Dallas Theological Seminary, which is like one of the most prominent conservative theologies in America at the time. But I ended up, moving overseas and getting a job. So I've wanted to be in seminary for like 15 years by the time I finally enrolled. And I think I was kind of running out of my faith and trying, like I knew I was meant to go to seminary, something I'd always wanted, but the seminary I went to was really liberal and it was interfaith. So we had Muslims, Baha'i, atheists, Jewish people, Christian, agnostic, and we're all studying scripture though. They're all there to study the Bible. And then we'd be in these Bible classes, and each different segment had to bring their tradition's interpretation of scripture. And then I'd be in class listening to all of these segments and beliefs and cultures bring their interpretation, and every single one was better than the one I had been taught. And I was this moment of like, I've been duped. I've been given down the most whitewashed, hetero, male-centric version of this, and the queer, the Black, the Jewish, the Muslim, the Baha'i interpretations were all better. And it was kind of like, I'm done. I'm out. I plus I'm not white, I'm not a man, and I'm not straight. So why am I why am I holding so tightly to this interpretation that was passed down to me?
Yeah, Christianity is a man's religion, really.
Yeah.
It gives so much benefits to men.
Yeah.
So, and was it about this time that you kind of discovered that you were queer?
Yeah, I realized I was queer in 2016. I started seminary in 2017, and I came out publicly in 2017. So I was like, everything was kind of like unraveling. My whole identity around my sexuality, my whole identity around my faith, like everything I thought I knew to be true was all of a sudden kind of blowing up. And it was one of the most terrifying and ultimately healing experiences in my life, because I realized my queerness before I questioned my faith. And when I realized my queerness, I thought, if I can be this old in my 30s and thought I knew my sexuality all along and I was absolutely wrong, what else do I think I know to be true and I'm completely wrong on? And that's when I started to unpack and deprogram and question all the things I've been taught all my life, which eventually helped me walk away from my faith.
Interesting. So do you think that you were that you always had, I guess you always were queer in a way, or do you think you kind of that developed over time, or you
Always
just kind of
queer.
noticed it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Looking back, it was so obvious. I had so many girl crushes. I was like making out with my girlfriend, one of my best friends in middle school. Like, but because I was never, I was never even exposed to the queer community. I didn't have vocabulary. I didn't have exposure. I didn't have labels. So I think I somehow knew to shove all that down. And just repress it and be afraid of it. I was so afraid when in my Bible college, I had a crush on my girlfriend, and I was so afraid of, like, if this ever comes out, like, shove it down, shove it down, shove it down, because that's not okay. Like, that's really
Mm.
wrong. So yeah, I was there all along.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's so yeah, so that must have been, you've gone through quite a journey, let me tell you. Like do you ever like look back at like and go like, wow, I've had such a shift, I guess, in your perspective. I guess does it feel like a shift, or is it more that you look at the outwards perspective of yourself and it looks like a shift?
It feels
Or do
like
you feel the same?
multiple lifetimes. I feel like I've lived
Okay.
multiple lives, and I feel like this version I'm living now was like the truest version I've ever had, but it is so far different from what I've ever been that that's the only way I can explain it. It's like it's just a different life, and I almost feel like a different person um than who I've ever been. And I love it. I feel like this is absolutely like the truest version of me, and I can't wait to see where I go from here.
I'm excited to like follow you in your journey. I love seeing, because you have such a freedom in what you post, and you can really see that come through in what you do. Um, there's there's an interesting conversation to have around porn, giving like long-term consent, like the idea of like people need to know what they're getting into when they go into porn, and there's obviously some problems in the industry and things like that. But what I love about you is you've definitely, and I watched your interview with Holly Randall, you've definitely taken the approach as responsibly for your own well-being as possible. Like you've really taken it, you've only done whatever you wanted to do, you've taken it all into your own hands, and for you it seems to be an outlet to
Mm.
explore your sexuality, and kind of, you use the word bless other people with a satisfying experience.
Oh my God.
And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, um, it does feel like a way for me to channel my sensuality. And I started my OnlyFans for me. It was
Mm,
not to make money. It was for me. It's like I needed a platform that was private because I had a paywall. It just for me to like, what's it feel like to post sexy photos of myself? Do I like that? What's my limit? Do I want to show anything? Do I want to keep it all covered? Like it was just almost like a playground for me to figure out, is this what I like? What do I enjoy? And it's been very much on my terms. And like that's one advantage I think starting a little bit later in life is I feel very, very grounded in who I am and what I want. I regret not being able to do this at age 18. If I could relive my life all over, I would have been a sex worker right off the gate of high school. Like no doubt, either a stripper or an escort or something. But I think there's wisdom that comes with age and with lived experience. And so I appreciate that I started when I did, because it comes from such a grounded, integrated, truthful place for me. And I think that's why I can be in it for so long. I see a lot of girls come and go, come and go, come and go. And I just
mm,
stay because it brings me so much joy and meaning and satisfaction, and everyone else gets to benefit from it as a result.
yeah. Yeah. ChatGDP said, "Thank you for standing up for LGBT rights." Thank you so much for the super chat, ChatGDP. I really appreciate it. And I have to know, are you a real person, or are you actually the AI that created by Elon Musk?
You're now going to forever wonder.
um, so I have a bit of a fun question. If you could put up a Bible verse in the background of your next sex tape, what would it be?
Oh my God, that is so good. Oh my gosh. It would probably be something erotic and explicit from like Song of Solomon or something. But I did just think of the one that like Jesus wept. I think would be kind of hilarious. But
That's great.
Thank you, Nitty.
So Nitty's great. So Iron Charioteer said, question for Nicole: what is the worst thing you've done to get a guy to turn him off of you? So before you knew about consent, did you ever do anything to, I guess, like
to turn him down? Is that what that means, or to stop him making up?
I think so. I think so. Like to.
I don't know if I've ever done anything really terrible. I was really bashful and shy, and I had a lot of body shame and sex shame. I didn't have a voice. I really didn't know how to advocate for myself. So I feel like anytime a guy was attracted to me that I wasn't into, I was really like coy, like, oh, thanks so much. I'm just like not interested. I can't tell a funny story though. I remember, because I've had, just a handful of guys pursue me over life, like lots of guys. And I remember at one point in my 20s, another guy had like really pursued me, and I had no interest in him, but I couldn't just honestly say that, right? Because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So my only excuse I could come up with that would give me an easy out was, oh, I'm not dating right now, right? Like I'm just not dating, when I really want to say, oh, I don't want to date you. So I said, I'm just not dating. And then like a month later, I met who would go on to be my husband. I met a guy, fell head over heels for him. The next month we started dating, and the next month I was engaged. So 2 months after I told this man I'm not dating, I see him at a party and I have an engagement ring on my finger. And I was just like, oh my God. And I felt so bad. He points, he's like, so that happened. I'm like, yeah, it happened. And that was that. Poor guy.
Oh, geez, that's rough. So, you're happily married now, right?
No, so we got divorced. So my then husband, we got divorced almost 3 years ago, and I'm dating someone now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Forgot one. Oh yeah, the question was: would you, would you date a lady, or is it purely sexual for you when it comes to?
Ooh, yeah, I would. So I identify as pansexual, bisexual, whatever, but pan's my favorite. And for me, what that means, I'm attracted to all peoples, like whatever your gender is, whatever your orientation is, I'm just like a lover. So I could easily date a woman, a trans person, a non-binary person, a man. Like I can date any of them. I'm attracted to all humans. The person I am currently with is a man.
Okay, cool. Oh, awesome. So, okay. So you mentioned that when you were, I want to get to the part where you talk about when you first started doing your like photo shoots and stuff. But I want to first ask you, what were some of the things you saw behind the curtain at church that made you kind of start questioning whether or not it was a valid, I guess, belief system or something you didn't like?
I think for me, for my last church, I was in, this is a crazy thing. This last church, it was in like the 2010s to 2017. I was there, right? It's the first church I'd ever been to in my life that practiced or that said gender equality. That women were equal to men. 2011 is when I went there. Like brand new concept. I remember when I was engaged to my then husband, and we were having a conversation about a marriage. He's like, I don't expect you to submit to me. And I was like, what? What? Like, who am I marrying? Who is this like liberal? Like my whole life I've been groomed and trained and indoctrinated to submit. And I was so uncomfortable because I've been taught my whole life I'm not an equal. So when I went to this church, it was the first church I went to that preached equality. My mind was blown. They saw my leadership and my passion for theology. So they started mentoring me to become a pastor. And I was like so elated because I'd always wanted to be a speaker. But because women can't be preachers, I always called myself a motivational speaker, to kind of like wiggle.
Yeah,
so dumb.
Yeah.
Right?
I know what you mean.
And then the more I rose up in the church, the more I saw what went down behind the scenes. And I saw, oh, they preach equality. They don't live it. They give all the passes to all the men, all the paid positions, all the best positions. And women were always kept down, and women were always given a million extra hoops to jump through. The finish line kept being pushed back. We were never being paid. It was just like, I just became more and more disillusioned the more I stayed there and the more I saw the discrepancy between what they taught and what they lived. And it eventually got me to a point of, I tried it for 5 years. I tried to play their game and I saw, oh, their game is that I never rise, I never win. And then I had to pull out.
Yeah, it's it is crazy because a lot of it's like subconscious for these people. Like I experienced the same thing. You don't realize how, like I went to a family wedding just recently, and it was like a lot of the you promise to submit to your husband and all, and you kind of like, ooh, it feels kind of like my wife and I we have a very equal relationship. Like we like there's no gender roles essentially in our relationship. We tend to gravitate towards certain things naturally. Like I'll definitely pick up our dog's poos in the backyard and mow more than my wife does, and she'll definitely wash more than wash. Yeah, but it's not But yeah, there's no like, oh no, I'm the man. I don't cook or anything like that. But and I don't understand people who, I don't understand people who like have those like roles in their relationship. It's weird to me. Like I have friends and family who are like, oh, my wife said no, and I'm like, what do you mean? You're your own person. Like, what do you mean? Like you shouldn't be telling it. Like the wife will say you're not allowed to go out with your friends or whatever night, and then he'll say you can't wear that out, and I'm like, what is this? This is such a weird world that you guys live in. I never understood it.
Yeah, and I can say that, and I was part of that, and I totally agree with you. It was so subconscious. It was like, oh, okay, I should cover my skin, and like, oh, okay, I just bought into it, and now that I'm out of it, it's like now I'm like, how, what, why, when did this ever become acceptable? Much less celebrated. Like in these circles, it's celebrated to be submissive to your husband, to let him control. It's just like, it is so mind-boggling, and it makes me all the more grateful that I got out of that.
There's this story that I've told a million times, and people are going to be sick of me telling it, but I'm going to tell you because I think it's a great story. But what I discovered, since I started interviewing women who deconstructed their faith on this channel, and the common thread that I always find is that the purity culture stuff, like do you ever go through, like when you're a teenager or a young adult, you went through like men's and women's groups where it's like, and so in the men's groups, we would essentially have like no masturbation clubs. We would install software in each other's like computers and to make sure we're not looking at porn. And we would text each other, pray when one person was feeling horny, and then the other person would go and pray for them to stop the spiritual warfare. But what I didn't know is like, so we were kind of being told we're a predator and we're going to want sex all the time. We need to hold it back through the power of Jesus, of course. And women were told, you need to stop men stumbling and so if you wear a long skirt or you wear a top that's a bit too low or whatever, you're going to cause a man to stumble. Or like they had like my church had ones where it's like they encouraged all the girls like this Sunday we're all going to come to church with no makeup on, and it was like a big like whoa, like. And it kind of pissed me off a little bit, to be honest, because I was like, it pissed me off not for the reasons a lot of people think. It pissed me off because why can't women be sexual deviants who also want to perv on guys and also, like why would they? Yeah, exactly. It bothered me that it was almost like the inner feminist in me came out and was like, this is bullshit. Women can be disgusting, degenerate, like perverts as well, and that's totally fine. And it also creates this like environment where men are told that they're predators and they need to hold back their emotions, right? Like and then they don't masturbate all week, and then Sunday comes around, and the older Martha who runs the library store at church has a top on that's showing 1 centimeter of cleavage, and they're like, I can't take it, and then it confirms all the feelings that they had, and she feels that pressure getting perved on, so she's like, I got to cover up even more, and it's like this self-perpetuating like thing of shame and guilt. And then like as a young teenager, I would look at pornography or masturbate and feel so much guilt and shame, like horrible amounts of it. And none of my other friends were dealing with that, and I think it created more problems than it solved.
Than it helped.
Like,
yes.
Yeah, 100%.
It's so interesting. So I have 3 kids, age 7, 10, and 12, and my youngest is a boy. So far, he can change, unless that changes. And I remember someone was watching him and he wanted to watch Titanic, my 7-year-old. And the person watching him called me asking and told my son, like, oh, we have to call your mom and ask if it's okay. And my son's like, why? And the person's like, well, because there's like a scene with a naked woman in it. And he's like, my son says, I see my mom naked all the time. So what? And I just
Mm,
loved like even at this age, because this is when like when we program our children to think certain things, and like at this point I knew to always cover, to always hide, to be ashamed, whereas in my home we've normalized the human body and to not be afraid of it.
really?
And like if you see a naked woman in Titanic, we can talk about it, right? And he would talk, he's like, why do her boobs look like that? I'm like, well, boobs look all different, some have smaller, some have, and we have a whole conversation and there's no shame. And I just think of like how much that's going to serve them in the future, because they're not, it's so funny for the work that I do, my kids aren't being raised in a hypersexualized home. They're being raised in a body positive, sex positive home where we can talk about
Mm,
all these things and approach it from a really healthy, educated perspective. And it's just, I'm just so excited because I'm like, I can't wait to see how that serves them, because I didn't have that growing up. And I always wonder
yeah.
how might my life had been different had I been raised with that kind of communication and understanding and education.
So is there like nudity in, like, are you just happy to be nude in front of your children, or your children be nude in your house?
Yes, I'm
Wow,
like
that's
naked all the time. Like I don't even think twice about it. And it's so funny. I have this poster board right here next to me. You guys can't see, and I clipped out my favorite photos from 2022. It's my 2022 celebration board. And I have a few photos in there that have me partially naked for my photo shoots. And one of my kids asked me, "Mom, like, is that weird for the photographer to take pictures of you like that?" And I was like, "No, I pick really good photographers. They're really professional. I do it for my work. I'm really professional, and they're some of my favorite photos." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so just provide, like, I love what I do because A, I love it, but B, it provides so many opportunities to have conversations with my kids that wouldn't otherwise naturally occur. And I'd have to find ways to force a conversation to occur. But they just, because I have lingerie everywhere, I have pictures everywhere, I have dildos everywhere. Like, we're just constantly talking about all things sex and body and consent. And they know more than I think the average kid. And I think it's really amazing.
This has actually blown my mind a little bit, because I thought that, I'm gonna raise our children. We just had a little baby boy, Atlas, and
Oh,
he's 5 weeks old, and I was like, I'm gonna raise him to be um body positive and free. And I think someone even asked me, like, would you care if your daughter became a sex worker? And I'm like, actually, I wouldn't. Like, I don't like, I think if that's what they wanted to do, like, I would care if they were doing it because they were desperate, or and they needed money for drugs or something. But that's not the sex workers problem. That's the so yeah, if they were doing it in a healthy, positive way, I would have no issues with it. And they were kind of shocked at that answer. But I never considered the idea of totally destigmatizing nakedness. Like, obviously, a lot of cultures would have done that for many years, and a lot of cultures still do it, and it's probably really common in like Europe and stuff. But that's really interesting. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to show Amy, my wife, this video and get her thoughts on it, because that's an interesting idea. I'm naked all the time around my dog, but
yeah.
I've always been wondering, like, at what age do I start putting clothes on around or my wife and I start putting clothes on around, how old does Atlas need to be that we start covering up,
It'll
Interesting. It's an
happen.
interesting
It'll
thought.
happen naturally, because my oldest at this point probably like, "Mom, put clothes on." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I'll throw a robe on." But like my youngest saw me peeing because he walked by my bathroom and my door's open, and he's like, "Your pee comes out there, or like comes out like that?" And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember one time you told me that you have 3 holes down there. Where are your 3 holes?" So I pull up my phone, I pull up an anatomy picture, and I'm like, well, he's going to learn everything, because there is no child leaving my house who does not know the anatomy of all genders. So I'm like, this is the clitoris. This is where the pee comes out. This is the vagina. This is where babies come out. This is where my blood comes out. And this is the labia. And he's like, well, why is there 2 parts here? I'm like, oh, that's the inner labia and that's the outer labia. And he goes, oh, that makes sense because one's on the inside and one's on the outside. I'm like, exactly. And he's like, cool. And then he ran off. And already there, I'm like, he knows more than probably the average teen boy.
Mm,
And it happened from him to see me doing something natural, which is using the bathroom. And because there's no shame in my house, it
mm.
changed. It's changed the way that I'm raising them.
Yeah, there was a really horrible story from someone on Deep Drinks recently. I'll just bring it up quickly. Where is it? Faye. So Faye grew up in a Hasidic Jewish cult, and they didn't learn about anything to do with sex, not even what sex was, until weeks before their wedding, before they were having sex for the first time. And a lot of these girls, there was this one hotel that all the Hasidic Jewish couples would go to, and for their wedding night, and there were, I think she said there were 2 or 3 cases of women jumping off the roof the next day afterwards because they were so traumatized by the experience of having sex. And of course, they had no idea what consent was. The man didn't know what he was doing, and they had sex for the first time, was so traumatized that they killed themselves. And I mean, this is a large community, but still 3 deaths are 3 deaths, and it's horrible to think that like she lost her family because her mum caught her wearing pants as she was walking home from the gym, and her mum did a ritual, which was essentially a ritual to like, if your child dies, you do that ritual. So she's like, you're dead to me because you wore pants. Like, it's crazy what religious beliefs can do. In saying that, actually, it's probably a good time to mention you have a YouTube channel, and it's not just all preaching. You have some other stuff going on there. Of course, you have an OnlyFans as well. Like, I'm not going to bring that up, but it's linked in the description. If you would like to support Nicole and you'd like to see Nicole's bits and have that pleasurable experience, go over there and make sure you mention that you're from Deep Drinks so she can.
Yes, I would love that.
Hey, that'd be so funny.
I love knowing where my people come from. They can totally say that.
Awesome. And of course, you do life coaching as well, and a bunch of other really cool stuff. And you've been kind of everywhere. Like, you're really good at marketing yourself. So your website is hey, that's an image. But I was wondering if I get in trouble for that, but we'll be fine on YouTube, I think. But yeah, check out your website, nicolemitchell.com, and obviously your Instagram as well, which is full of the I guess the Instagram ready versions of your stuff from OnlyFans. Exactly. Something you did mention actually is you get your posts removed more than someone with the same image that's a guy on Instagram, right?
Oh my gosh.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the double standards are real. My male photographers, we can post the exact same photo and mine gets taken down and my account gets reported. Like I'm warned. Like, if you violate our community standards, if you do it again, your account may be deleted. But all my photos, the exact same ones I posted, all stay up on their account. It's crazy. And so I used to fight against it because I'm just such a free spirit, and like, speaking of consent, you can't tell me what to do. It's my page, my account. But at the end of the day, it's their fucking platform. They can do whatever they want. So I just have to play safer. Because people don't realize is 3-4 years ago, you could post full nudes on Instagram as long as you just censored the tiny bits. And then it's actually during political season, when it gets closer to election, it gets really conservative, and a lot of pages and accounts and photos are taken down. Right now, we're in a really relaxed period. So now there's more nude photos I've ever seen in 3 or 4 years. And I'm like jealous because I want to post mine, but it's not worth risking losing my account over. So I just play more safe to keep it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's crazy. That's very crazy. So you mentioned that the first time you ever took nude photos, I don't know if this is the first time, but the first impactful moment you took nude photos was when you had big boobs from breastfeeding and you felt really sexy because of that. So you got a friend to take photos for you. Is that right?
Yeah. I think I've always been super sensual, and I had a girlfriend I'd see like once a year, and for whatever reason, she would I'd ask her to take naked photos of me. And when I had my breastfeeding boobs, they were so big and luscious. I would call them my porn star boobs. I'm like, oh my God, I love my porn star boobs. And then, after my kids were done breastfeeding, they shrank to even smaller than what they were originally. And I was so sad. And yet had never really considered getting a boob job until I moved to California. And out here, plastic surgery, like everyone has plastic surgery out here. And I actually love it. Women out here know what they want and they let themselves have it. There's no question. Whereas in the Midwest, our highest goal is to like deny ourselves, sacrifice, be selfish, suppress your desires. But in California, it's like, I want that, I'm going to have it. And so that being in this space gave me permission, like, oh, well, I've always loved big boobs and it's normal here. And that's what gave me the courage to finally get a boob job. And they're still smaller than my breastfeeding boobs. Because I like my breastfeeding ones gave me headaches. They were so full, and so I went a little bit smaller.
Yeah. I see Amy like come out of the shower now or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, like what, like, whoa, like what, like, you know, it's like, whoa, okay, hello. Yeah.
At least for me, I love big boobs.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with mine.
I like all kinds of boobs. I'm a very,
variety.
I like anything, to be honest. I'm let me just say I'm a passionate man when it comes to ladies. But so you had these photos taken and then eventually you decided to get a professional photo shoot. Tell us, what was it like? What was it about?
Yeah. So for years, I had my girlfriend take these photos and I had nowhere to share them. So I just keep them on my phone just for me. And I look at them now and then. I'm like, oh my God, these are so beautiful. Like I wanted the world to see these. And then so when OnlyFans came out, I mean, I didn't learn about OnlyFans until 2019. And when I did, I was like, oh my God, this is an answer to prayer. And then when I moved to California, no one here knew who I was. So it was like a fresh slate for me. No one knew I came from a religious background. No one knew I just left my big mega church. Like I could be anything I wanted to be. And I wanted to be a model. I wanted to be an actress. I've wanted to be those things since I was a little girl until I was taught that those are vain and shallow pursuits and interests. And I was reclaiming my desires. And I was like, well, I want to be a model. Maybe I'll just like dabble. Like I'm too old. I'm too short. I'm too late, but I'll try it. And so I booked with a photographer I've been following for probably a year, and I loved his work, and he does fine art nude. And so he came to California, we did a shoot, I did a total nude shoot, and as soon as we wrapped up, I got my car and I bawled because I was like, I have never felt more holy, more pure, more true in this moment. Like there's literally nothing between me and God. It is just me as I was fucking born. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a nude model. I want to do this like this. I want to do this. And so that's kind of what birthed this like dabble with modeling to like, no, I want this to be full time.
Wow, that's actually super interesting. 91.5% of men and 60.2% of women reported having consumed pornography in the last month. It's so funny to me that everyone enjoys it, but it's such a taboo for people to participate in it almost.
People are so afraid of pleasure, especially in religious and conservative sections, like so afraid of feeling good. And I think we have this like collective fear that as soon as it's going to feel good, it's too good to be true. The other shoe's going to be dropped. The rug's going to be pulled out from under you. Nothing good ever lasts. Like we literally have these quotes in our world, in our country that betray our ultimate belief. Nothing good lasts. And once it feels good, something bad is going to follow. So if you don't want something bad to happen, then you're going to suppress the good. And so part of my journey has been learning to like expand my capacity for pleasure, feeling safe with feeling good. And now I get a lot of people who sign up for my digital courses or sign up with me as a client, as a coach, client relationship. They want to learn, how can I live a life that's rooted in pleasure, where it's just there's more and more and more pleasure and nothing bad has to happen and I don't have to sabotage it and there's no cost to pay for it. Like it really gets to be this good. And so that's one thing I love about my porn or my adult content that I create, because it is so authentic and is born from like my truest self. I think it's so refreshing for people because like when you come to my space, when you come to my OnlyFans, we can talk about all things sex and all things spiritual. We can talk about your kids and your kinks, your fears and your fetishes. There's nothing off limits. And in most adult spaces, you can only talk about things all sex. But in my space, I want to know all of you. Like when I said, tell me that you came from this podcast. Tell me where you found me. Like I actually care about you and I want to get to know you. And I think that's such a unique thing that people like me and platforms like OnlyFans can offer the world. And I think it's actually going to give people what they need, or what they're looking for. They get the pleasure and they get the connection. And I'm hoping that will help dispel the shame a lot of people carry and feel more good in their body, more good in their pleasure, and freer to consume it, freer to experience it, freer to give it. And I think the whole world will benefit from that.
Did you find that that after you started doing nude modeling and started opening up a lot more, and now you're doing you re-release your sex tape, do you find that you're actually more, I guess, free? Like have you found that your sex life has actually gotten better?
Oh gosh, so much better. When I say I make love like a porn star, it's like the truest statement, the most accurate statement, and the hottest sex of my life. Like It is so fucking good, David. And like, it's weird to like toot your own horn or brag about your own sex life, but it's because I've been
Mm,
on the other extreme where I
yeah.
was so ashamed of my body and so afraid of sex that like I was not fun to have sex with, right? I was just so
Mm,
locked. And now to be so free and I know my body really well. I know my kinks, I know my fetishes, and I'm really open. I'm always open to exploring. I'm really fun to have sex with. And it's
mm.
like healing for me and it's healing for people I've been with. Like to see how free and happy and unashamed I am, it sets other people to feel like, oh shit, I can love it this much too. And it's okay to love it this much too. And like it's okay to have curiosities and want to explore more things. And I'm like, yes, 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 and yes.
Mm. I've been an appreciator of adult cinema a few times in my life, and you can actually really tell the difference between someone who is enjoying the experience, like the whole they would be doing it without getting paid, versus someone who is there because they feel they want the attention for, I guess, whatever reason, or they need the money or something like that. Like you can see the difference between a healthy a healthy approach to engaging in like pornographic
Mhm.
material or adult sex work, and what comes across as like someone's not enjoying this as much, like they're faking it, right? um what do you think? Do you think there needs to be a conversation that needs to be had around pornography and how it's kind of pervasive amongst, like, how it's kind of, I guess some parts are glamorized, like, and some parts, I'm finding hard to come up with a good question, but do you see that, like, any issues in the landscape at the moment? Like, do you think that there
Mhm.
needs to be a conversation to be had around sex work? Obviously, the answer is probably yes, but you're already having that conversation, and you're trying to promote, I guess, a responsible, freeing,
Mhm.
open, explore your body, like no shame approach, which I think is great. Do you think there's another side of the coin though, where people need to understand the long-term ramifications of maybe,
Mhm.
if they're not ready emotionally to have sex, or to have sex on camera, or to even show themselves um, being naked? Do you think there needs to be have a conversation on both sides?
Yeah, there's a few things here. So one is, at the end of the day, sex work and porn's a job, like any other job is a job. So whether someone does it out of passion, like me, or someone does it just to pay their bills, I think they both can be healthy. I don't think
Hmm.
one is unhealthy. Just like we all get a job at some point to pay the fucking bills, doesn't mean you're unhealthy or you're doing it for
Yeah, that's
unhealthy
a good
reasons.
point.
It's legit. So I just happen to be really, really privileged that I can do it out of passion and that
Mm.
I was able to choose it on my terms. I didn't need it for the money. Like I think it's a total legit path if you need money and you're cool with like using your body in that way, go for it. I have a lot of privilege on my platform and I came into it in a digital era where I could perform it all online. Right? If I had started this when I was 18, like I sometimes wish I could have, I would have been in person, whether as an escort or as a stripper, and that there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of middlemen and you're at way more risks, and so I know I hold a lot of privilege as an online performer. I That naturally eliminates most risks that a lot of other adult performers and sex workers have to face in their in-person workplace. um, and so I think that's the part of the conversation. Like I always want to acknowledge my privilege and people know like mine is just mine is just my own experience. There's as many experiences as there are humans. But I wish more people would realize it's just a job, like in so many ways. And if that's your ticket to get money paid and to get your bills paid and to make money or to it's the only job you can see yourself doing, I think that's totally legit. And sometimes people say to me like, how could you like sell your body and use it that way for work? And I'm like, don't we all sell our
Mm.
bodies? Whether you're a
Mm.
doctor using your hands and your brains and your eyes to perform surgery, or you're a dentist using your hands and your eyes to do oral care, or you're a server serving food, we all use our bodies for work. It's only the fact that you have stigma and shame around sex work that you would ask a sex worker that. But we all use our bodies and we all use our bodies to make money.
It's really interesting that, because I couldn't form the question very well, that there's still like must be some underlying like, um underlying religious thought or something going on in my brain where I equivocated that I didn't pick that up. That yeah, it is just work, and I was just like, oh yeah, someone's doing it because they need the money. Where I kind of view that as I kind of portray that as a negative thing. Just so everyone knows, I'm very new to this conversation. I wanted to have Nicole on here because she's has thought about this a lot. You say that you think too much about things, and I can relate. So yeah, it's interesting how this conversation is actually getting me to think a lot about. I think this is more beneficial for me than anyone else. I'm really getting to think a lot about the kind of perspectives that I hold about. I thought I was pretty progressive, but I guess I got more to think about. This is super interesting.
Me too. I like, on Twitter, I follow almost all sex workers because I knew this. I've only been in this field for 3.5 years. There's people who've been in it for decades, and they've seen the evolution. And like, I want to know where I've come from, like all the shoulders I'm standing on, all the giants who came before me and paved this way where I could have so much freedom and privilege and safety and profit. When so many sex workers have struggled over the years. And so like, I am constantly learning and constantly being educated, and I love it. Like, I'm like, please don't stop. Please keep teaching me so that we can all make this world a better place.
Is there you mentioned the greats. Are there greats that you particularly look up to, like people that you find inspiring?
Yeah.
Who are they?
So probably the 3 or 4, there's 4. So there's Jenna Jameson, there's Pamela Anderson, there's Angela White, and then Elle Stanger are my 4 probably favorites. And Jenna Jameson is fucking rad. And I didn't learn about her until like 2 years ago. And all my friends were horrified I hadn't heard about her. But my upbringing. How would I know who porn stars were? I didn't even know. I couldn't even watch cartoons as a kid. There were certain cartoons I couldn't watch because they were too much, for my family. So when I learned about these porn stars later in life, and I'd read their autobiographies or their memoirs, and I would see all the shit they went through, and I'm like, and my heart breaks for them, and yet I'm so proud of them for being so badass and so powerful, and like still choosing this path that most people say you're broken or busted to take this path after all they went through. And now I'm at this point in time where I have so much privilege and ease of access to everything, and I have to give credit where credit is due. And it's people like Jenna Jameson, even Pamela Anderson. I watched her documentary and I was like, oh my God, this like sex symbol I thought was so inspiring. She was absolutely torn to shreds and ruined through the process, and not at her fault, right? It was all used against her. And it's like, I don't, I've had it used against me, but we live in a little bit different era than she did. And then Angela White is like the biggest porn star right now in the adult industry. And I always joke, had I been raised in a non-Christian home, I would be Angela White. Like, she is like in the traditional porn industry, that's me. That's who I wish I could be if I did things traditionally or in person.
Angela White is the GOAT. Like, in regards, like I've done. She's really well spoken, and she like finished her degrees in Melbourne in Australia. On I think it was, I can't remember what her degrees were, but like she's got a really, like, she really knows like what she's doing in regards to, like, she's an amazing performer, but she's also incredibly like she sets the rules. She doesn't like, she went into it like a business, and I totally
she's
understand.
a brilliant businesswoman, right? She has her own production team. She produces and directs her own porn, and like she's incredibly smart. And I also related to her because she's wanted to do this since she was a teenager, and no one understood her. And I'm like, oh my God, I can so relate, because in middle school, I would talk to my girlfriends how I wanted to be a stripper someday, thinking everybody wanted to be a stripper because I was so sexual, and they all looked at me like horrified. And I was like, oh, everyone doesn't want to be a stripper? Like, I so related to Angela when she's like, I've wanted this since I was a little girl.
Yeah, it's so funny. I have so many stories myself of that, like not the same as that, but like just things that I thought were normal, but they weren't normal. Like the shame and stuff around sex and stuff like that is a big thing. So when you're so you've probably gone through a lot, right? So when it comes to deconstructing your faith, was that a hard part of your journey, deconstructing your faith? And unlearning all that stuff?
I was terrified. Like, I was about to release everything I knew to be true and all the people that came with it. Because when you leave your faith, you're not just leaving your faith, you're leaving your community. right? And so
Mm.
when I was in my first year in seminary, I was constantly asking my professors and my classmates, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, what if I'm traumatizing my children? What if they grow up and they hate me because I pulled them out of the church? Like, because when I pull them out, like, they lose all their friends. Um, yes, agree, Sylvia. And I proudly identify as a slut, right? Like, I reclaimed that term. But you're
Yeah.
totally right. Um, and so I was constantly questioning, what if I'm doing this wrong? And I'd have my professors and classmates say to me, they like, I wish I was raised in a home where my mom openly talked about this stuff, where she would have shared with me, I'm questioning, I'm not sure. I used to believe this, now I'm not so sure. Like, they're like, I would have felt so much freer and safer as a kid had that been my home. And I would try to like cling to their words because I was still so scared. What if I'm making the wrong decision? And then after a couple of years, I'm like, oh, I think I made the right decision. And now I'm like, oh my God, that was the right decision. But there were a
Mm.
couple of years there where I was a little wobbly because I was leaving everything and everyone for the unknown. And I had no idea where it's going to lead me. Had no idea I was going to be making adult content. That was not the intention. The intention was, who am I underneath all the dogma? Who am I underneath all the indoctrination? What do I actually want out of my life? And lo and behold,
Yeah.
led me here.
Wow. So did you feel like you had a personal relationship with Jesus, or like, or was it more? So how
Oh,
did that, do you still feel like you have a personal relationship with Jesus? Like, how did that develop?
no,
So,
I was like a total Jesus freak. Like I felt so guilty having sex in high school. I only had it a handful of times with a couple different guys, and I felt like a horrible slut, horrible human, horrible future wife. So I became celibate for 6 years, self-imposed celibacy. I didn't date at all my entire four
so
years
did
of
I.
college. Like
Same thing. I
the
had sex with my high
experiences
school girlfriend, and then like 5 or 6 times, and then was celibate until like from 16 to like 20 something. Like,
Like
yeah.
the experiences we were robbed of, David. It makes me so mad. Like if there's any time to be a slut, it's fucking college. Like what I was in a Bible college. There's no like sluthood to be found there, but
Yeah,
still, I
yeah, yeah.
felt deprived. And so yeah, I was robbed of that. And I remember. I mean, I've never told anyone this, and I'm like slightly embarrassed to say this, but this is how much of a Jesus freak I was. I remember like in college driving my car and putting my hand in the passenger seat like I'm holding the hand of Jesus. I'm like, I'm dating Jesus until I find my husband. Like that is how
No,
hardcore I was. It's
yeah,
so embarrassing. And
yeah,
now I'm like, was Jesus real? I don't know. Like that's the other extreme I've made. I'm like, I don't know
yeah.
if he was real. Was he the son of God? I think we're all God's children. So what makes him so special? Like
Mm.
I question everything that I was taught about him.
Yeah, we had Dr. Jennifer Bird, who's still a Christian, and she's a strong Christian, and she's a Bible scholar. And she said that she went from dating Jesus in college, so she'd go on dates with Jesus, where she would go to a cafe and pray and all that stuff. And she kind of rebuked her mum when her mum was getting ordained as a pastor. Like, she's like, how, you know that this isn't okay. The Bible says that, and now she's a big time ally for LGBT folks. She writes about gender, sex, and marriage within the Bible. Like, she is like hardcore, like, cool. She's really cool. She's going to be on the panel, actually, the slavery panel that's coming up.
Okay.
So so when you left the church, do you have any funny moments about getting judged by the church members or family?
It was interesting when I left the church. No one said anything, and it's like kind of ideal, but also heartbreaking. I'd spent 6 years, 7 years of my life there. I was in the nursery. I was in the high school. I spoke to the high school group. I was speaking to my church. I was involved everywhere. I held their babies, taught their teenagers, spoke to the church, and like no one said anything. When all of a sudden I was gone, and I was like, really? I poured my entire heart, life, and soul into all of you for 6, 7 years, and not a word.
Really?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Do they all catch wind that you were like doing like nude modeling and stuff, or was it?
Oh yeah, because they all followed me
Yeah.
on Facebook, and that was part of my terror. Was like, if I want to do this, there's no way of doing it sneakily, because like everyone and their mom follows me on social media, and so that's when I decided to write a coming out post to kind of like be very clear about what I'm about to start or what I've already started. And if you want to join me for the ride, hop on. If you are offended or just, dismayed, please unfollow or unsubscribe now, and just kind of put that out there. And that's when I think I got some like, oh my God, you're an embarrassment for Jesus, or come back to the church, or you've totally lost your soul. I got some messages there, but I think most of them were kind of shell shocked and like didn't know what to do. And I feel like I feel like they're all like watching, like I'm their reality TV show they turn on at night, like their trash TV they don't ever want to admit to.
Half of them are probably masturbating looking at your stuff anyway. Like how, like
Oh
it's
my
probably
God.
not even.
It's so true. I always say I just do in public what they do in private, and that's what
Yeah.
pisses them off
Yeah.
because I own it and they try
Yeah.
to keep it secret.
Yeah, and you probably do it way better than they do. Like they're probably
Like, let me help you with that. Here's my
Yeah.
my JOY video. I'll help you.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know who, like, I don't know who this was, but someone was in the chat saying, like, just before saying, you have a porn star on, you know the truth, like, to me. And I'm like, I don't think you know who I am. Like, who are I muted them. And everyone was like, they're a troll. And someone said, and Derek said, Jesus squirts. So, yeah, that definitely will set them away. So, but yeah, I was like, what the heck? But it's like, I was like, do they know who I am? What this is so strange. Anyway, obviously they don't know enough about me, but so you raise children now in a sex positive home. Have you lost relationships with your like family, like your other, I guess, your parents and siblings and stuff like that? Have you lost a relationship with them a little bit?
Yeah, all of them.
Really?
And I lost my 3 best friends.
Oh
So
my.
this path did not come without cost. And it's probably the most painful thing I've experienced in my life. And yet, like, people will say, well, do you regret it? I'm like, absolutely not. I don't regret being true to me. I regret that my people couldn't love the real me.
Whoa. So like, that's crazy. So do you have no relationship with them at all anymore? Is that on their behalf or on your behalf because they wouldn't stop preaching to you or something?
A mixture of both. Some of them completely cut me out right away. And that was that. And I only learned when I found out, like, oh, my texts aren't going through. I've been blocked. Like, oh, snap.
Oh.
And then somehow, they kept coming at me, and I wrote them, like, I love you, but this is really harmful for me. And until you're able to like kind of check yourself and like be in a better place and can treat me like a human, like, we can't talk. And so then I block them. So it's kind of a mixture of both, and both are equally heartbreaking.
Whoa. What's that old quote? It's like there's no hate like Christian love. And it's like geez, that's really rough. I'm really sorry that you've gone through that. That's
yeah, me too.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it's been really painful. And yet, maybe someday we'll have a relationship. I don't know, but I think part of it was really good for me in the sense, I think sometimes when you're constantly being battered or hounded, it's really hard to figure out where you stand and what your boundaries are. And finally, when all that noise is kind of eliminated, you get really clear on, oh, this is what I will tolerate and this is what I won't. Or this is like non-negotiable and this is negotiable. Like, you kind of get to heal when you're no longer being harmed. And I can see myself getting to a point where I've healed enough to where I'm like, okay, maybe I open that door again and see what can be arranged. But I don't think that healing could have happened while I was still being harmed.
Yeah. Wow, it's really brutal to hear when that stuff kind of happens. That was always a fear for myself and my wife and Amy when we kind of deconstructed our faith. Like, would our family still accept us as family, or like would they do what the Bible says, which is not to even eat with someone who called themselves a believer and now doesn't? Yeah, it's a really scary thing, and I'm so sorry that that's happened.
And that kind of answers your question that you asked a little bit ago, like, should there be more conversations ahead of time? And I do tell women, like, if you go into this, just be aware. Like, if you come from a really religious or controlling or fearful family, are you okay with them not supporting you? Are you okay with them cutting you off? Are you okay with cutting them off? Like, these aren't conversations that are had very often, because I think we don't want to admit that. But I think it can help prevent people getting into situations that maybe they don't want to get into. Because some women just like, oh, I'll just play with it, not knowing like their whole family is going to explode over it. And is it like, you want to play with it? Is it worth it to you? If it is, go for it. But if it's not worth it to you to play in it, maybe there's another thing you can do. So I think just being really honest with yourself about what am I okay with happening from here. And people get fired. Women have gotten fired for starting an OnlyFans. I have a dear friend who's a teacher in Indiana, and she got fired for starting an OnlyFans, and she was just playing with it. She was like, I can maybe make some side money, and lost her only source of income. And so it's like, you definitely want to think it through. And I don't want you to operate from a fear-based mentality, but I think just being really honest about what can you handle if these things happen to you.
Yeah. I often think that one of the problems with the adult entertainment industry is there's no way for someone to, once something is out there, it's always out there. There's no way for someone to like take it back. I would love for there to be some form of like NFT technology or something that someone can retroactively say, hey, I don't want to know, I no longer want these things to be on the internet. And then it does like a really good job at removing those things from the internet. If there wasn't the ability to like make it so like, people could save your content, like, I mean, obviously people could still probably screenshot or something, but you can make it really difficult for someone to be able to keep your content, or a lot more difficult than it is now, where you just save a video or it's just on a million websites, like content ID. If that could happen, and I think it is getting there, but I think that would solve a lot of the problems, because I think there is something to say about the retroactive, like looking and saying, I don't want to share this part of my life anymore, but it's still there. Do you know what I mean? There are people who, who's that really popular? There was a really popular porn star, Mila. She I forgot what her name was. She would dress up in like burqas and stuff, or Mia. Someone tell me. But she would she couldn't get a job after she only did like 8 scenes or something, and she couldn't get a job afterwards because she was so popular that everyone recognized her. She would start jobs and then they would fire her because it would bring too much unnecessary attention to the company, and she said it was horrible. And it's like, if her content could be removed like after the fact, like if you just say, hey, I no longer consent to this being out there, not only does it give the people more agency, but it helps it just gives them more agency. I think that's the
and I think like part of the solution to that is like decriminalizing sex work. Like, these women are being fired or not getting jobs because of stigma. Because at the end of the day, sex workers have incredible social and professional skills. We know how to do customer service. We know how to engage. We know how to get rid of customers. Like, we know how to turn anything into money. We are so good. We are an incredible asset to any business and company. And like, if it comes with all this attention, that's actually good for you. You have all this press that you can like turn around and utilize for your good. But because you have so much sex shame and stigma, that you then, instead of addressing your internalized whorephobia, you fire the woman whose only sole income, like, that was it for her and her babies. Like, my girlfriend who's fired from her teaching job, she's struggling with she and her children. She's the sole provider. And a man bought her photos, subscribed to her page, bought her photos, and then distributed them, like posted them on Facebook, sent them to her employer. And like, why isn't he the one getting in trouble for leaking content and publishing it publicly? And this is like,
that should be a crime,
right? That's the crime, not her. And I always tell people, there's nothing wrong sharing a nude photo. What's wrong is when someone leaks that. And so I think decriminalizing sex workers and sex work, and then criminalizing people who do crimes like that, we've got it totally backwards. And that's what's so heartbreaking. Is like, my sex worker friends are some of the most brilliant, compassionate women I've ever met, and yet they're the most punished. And the men who do things to them get off scotch-free. That's backwards.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, the world we live in. It's definitely very bizarre. Is prostitution illegal in the States?
Yes.
That's because
is it in Australia? It's decriminalized, right?
Yeah, we got brothels. We got brothels here. Like, they're not on like the main street, but like I had a friend who had a friend who worked at the brothel, and she said she went in with her, and it was amazing. She said they got beautiful rooms. There's like, it's all like really clean, and it's like, it's all, the sex workers, they everyone gets tested. They all like, there's all safe sex. There's bouncers, like, it's all safe. It's and it's Yeah, but it's like, I mean, but then we still have some weird things like in South Australia, it's illegal to own pornography if the women have A cup breast size. If their breasts are A cup, it's illegal for you to own that pornography because it's too close to children. But that's only in South Australia. It's very weird. It's very strange. It's very strange. But yeah, we have prostitution. It's weird to me that America doesn't have prostitution.
I know, we're like so progressive in so many
sex workers.
We're so backwards in so many ways. We're a weird dichotomy.
Yeah. We don't have guns. Like, it's very hard to find a gun.
That's how it should be. It's mind-boggling.
It's easy. Yeah. It's so
we're so backwards in that area.
Yeah, it's definitely different perspectives. I heard, I don't know how true this is. I have a friend who moved to Malaysia, I think, or a country, and then moved to the Philippines, and one of them was influenced by one country, and one of them was influenced by another, and one of them was influenced by the US. So I think it was the Philippines, and she first went to the Philippines, and she would hear these like coconuts falling at night, and she was like, it was a very Christian nation, and she was like, oh, coconuts, and she found out later there were gunshots, and there were like her family had guns all over the house. She slept next to some sort of a sniper rifle because her, and it's just like, whoa. I was like, this is hectic. But she's like, in Malaysia, it was a very Muslim inspired country. They didn't really have guns. That was all new to her. But it was so different how, I don't know, the Christian nation had all the, I don't know. It's just very strange how different countries influence other countries. And yeah.
Yes, and America, for being a Christian nation, teaching the love of Jesus while like carrying guns. It's like, it makes no sense to me.
I know. I remember watching, as an Australian, I remember watching Michael Moore documentaries, which they're a little bit they're very inaccurate now I've realized. But one of the things I noticed was, I remember watching one of them and I was like, why are the gun people talking about Jesus? Aren't they the bad ones? And I couldn't believe to me that a Christian would own a gun. I'm like, Jesus said, those who live by the sword die by the sword. He rebuked Peter for protecting the Son of God. Like, how can a Christian own guns? It was bizarre to me. And then I found out like they were the ones pushing, and I was like, what is going on here? And I know that there are people are going to argue in the comments that I'm misunderstanding things, and I probably am. But it was just, as an Australian, it was very weird to me that the Christians were the pro-gun people, and the atheists or the people who weren't necessarily believers were, it's very strange.
Yeah, it's like we teach the scripture teaches forgive your enemies, bless your enemies, and Christians are like, let's kill those motherfuckers. I'm like, wait a second, there's a disconnect here. I'm not following this train of thought.
Yeah. So as we're just wrapping up, I wanted to ask you about your coaching. What do you do for your coaching?
Oh my gosh. So I work one-on-one with clients, and I teach digital courses. So it's for people typically come to me for a couple of reasons. A good chunk of them come to me because they want to make a shit ton of money. I'm really passionate about helping people monetize who they are and what they love doing, and to help you make a shit ton of money. I think it's so doable. Easier than we've ever been taught. And then other people come to me because they want to live a fully expressed life, because they watch me. I'm do adult content full time, and I have a very successful life coaching business. And people thought the opposite would happen, that once I got into life coaching, no one would want to work with me. Once I got into adult content, everyone came to work with me, because they saw like, you're doing authentically, you're doing it in integrity, you're doing it passionately, and you're a great mom, and you're a great partner, and you're running a coaching business. Like, how do you do that? And so I have all kinds of courses, as you can see here: Become a Money Magnet, Absolute Confidence, Become a Viral Sensation. Currently I'm teaching my signature embodiment program called Sexy and Free, which is all about a life of pleasure, profit, and power. And I love it. I love helping people have the life of their dreams, and that's what I get to do with it.
How to unfuck yourself. I love, you just need to write a book. You just need to write a book on that, because the thing at the moment is, if you just put fuck in the title, you'll sell 1 million copies, right? Because
it's like all the F words. Who knew? The word I was told to never use is like the most profitable and powerful word I could.
My friend Colin, he's always wanted to be a writer, and he was one of the first guests on Deep Drinks. He's closeted for 45 years. I met him in ministry college, and now he's out and happy in a relationship. And I said, you just need to write a book. Doesn't matter what he's a great writer. I'm like, just put something out there, but you just got to call it "I'm fucking gay," and then it will sell. Like that's all you need to, you know what I mean? Like we're in the time for it. I got a marketing background. I know it will sell. Yeah.
I love it.
Cool. So and also for everyone who is watching, we are doing we got one more deep drinks at this stage until we have the slavery panel on. Let me just show it, but we're going to be talking about biblical slavery. Does the Bible condone slavery? And we're going to be sending out some shorts this week that I've got 5 ready to go, and we're going to be kind of getting these apologists to kind of forcing them to answer the question. This is going to be an amazing panel. We've got 5 PhDs, all Bible scholars, all experts, who are going to be discussing this. And coming up midway through the week, questioning Islam with critical faculty. This will be a good episode as well. He was a Muslim and now he's not. And I imagine that if he went to a few countries, he would be sentenced to death. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you check out the Patreon. I also need to say, guys, let me just excuse me for a sec. I don't have the link up, but we have a Pope. We have a Pope. So deep drinks, obviously, we have different memberships, and the last membership that you can get is the Pope, and there's only one, and it's been sold out. So this stream is actually sponsored by Papa Aaron, who, let me just scroll down and show everyone. These are all the so Papa Aaron Colson, he is the Pope of deep drinks, and this stream has been blessed by him, and every stream from until he is no longer the Pope and another Pope comes in. So thank you, Papa Aaron, for blessing this stream. So guys, if you want to join in, we've got a few more spots for the 12 founding members. So if you want to become a member of Deep Drinks, make sure you go Patreon, make sure you go subscribe. So yeah, Nicole, I have a few random questions for you. I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
I'll start off with a fun one that I ask a lot of guests, but I wasn't going to ask you, but I think it's probably you're introspective enough that I think it might be an interesting answer. What is the most plausibly true religion you don't believe in?
Oh my God. Wow. This is gonna sound silly, and it's not a religion, but I'm like, science, because
yeah,
I wasn't taught like real science growing up. I was taught like Christian science, like God was the reason for everything. I was never taught like actual science. And like my partner is brilliant in all things science, and he'll literally like do diagrams for me on a whiteboard. Like, here's atoms, here's cells, here's how they interact, here's how they create this, and here's how they create that. And every time I watch it, Malika, hi, thank you, my love you. Every time I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And yet I still have this reservation to believe it because I've been taught to fear science. So science is probably my religion, and yet I'm still grappling with totally wrapping my head around it.
Wow, that's great. Nidhi asked a question a while ago, but he said, were you a young Earth creationist? Or someone asked a question, were you a young Earth creationist at one stage?
Yes. Oh my God. So embarrassed.
Was it wild when you, because I was the same, was it wild when you started learning about like evolution, but not from the church, where it was like,
yes. I mean, I still get sweats over it. When people start talking about evolution, I'm like, because I was taught evolution was a bad word and it was all fake and all made up, and I still like break out in sweats. I'm like, oh wait, this isn't bad. This isn't wrong. This is like actually accurate, and like it's okay.
Yeah.
Be okay.
I have this funny story actually. I got a huge tax return one year, and so did my wife, and we're like, all right, we're going to put our money towards our house, but we're going to both take like $500 and we're going to spend on whatever we want. And I think I spent like $500 all on books. I just ordered so many books. And there's this old trope going around that that Hitler was an atheist, right? That Hitler was an atheist, and that's why he did everything that he did, which couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. In fact, in Mein Kampf, he says, I believe I am doing the work of the Almighty Creator in exterminating the Jew, right? Horrible, disgusting. So I ordered a copy of Mein Kampf because I wanted to have it to be able to pick it up and point people to the part and be like, he says he's doing it on behalf of God. So I ordered this book, right? Because it's just, I'm like, it's there. I ordered it with a bunch of other books. And when it arrives, I'm sitting there opening it amongst my religious family. And I open it, I'm opening the books and I say, oh, and I remember it, and I said, guys, just know that there is a book in here that's evil, and I was like, I don't want you to judge me for it. And then one of them said, is it a book on evolution? I was like, well, yeah, there are some books on evolution, but it's actually not. It's Mein Kampf. It's Hitler's autobiography, whatever. Like,
God, I can't.
Oh, yeah. And I have to be clear. I have it for references, and I even hid it in the back here because I don't want people to think that I endorse that scumbag or anything. It's a historical thing for me. Nidhi asked, if your kids are approached to believe in Jesus to get saved, what will you say to them?
Oh, they are, because some of my family members have access to them, and who believe, my children need to be saved. And so that's where it's pretty complicated. But they've asked me, like, Mom, do you believe in God? And I've said to them, like, I used to. Now I'm not so sure. What do you believe? Sorry, my kitty's knocking over my tripod. Get off your cat. And because my job as my parent is to keep my kids connected to their body and to their knowing, because I was taught to be disassociated, disconnected, to listen and trust everyone outside of me and not my own truth. So I'm always pointing it back to my kids. Or like, even like the tooth fairy, they're like, Mom, do you believe in tooth fairy? Or Santa Claus? Mom, do you believe in Santa Claus? I'm like, oh, I used to when I was a kid, but I don't anymore. What about you? Yeah, I think he's real. I'm like, cool. Like, I just want them to stay connected to that knowing. And if they make comments like, oh, hell, something about hell, I'm like, oh, it's so funny. I used to believe hell exists. I don't believe it exists anymore. Like, I just try to plant seeds, because I know if I try to, like, that's not true, don't listen to them, that like tends to make people dig in their heels, right? I just try to, like, I used to think that, I don't think anymore. And the whole time I'm like, because I don't want them to believe that stuff. I don't want them to think they need to be saved. Why? What do they need to be saved from? They're perfect, they're whole, they're divine, they're complete. It's total bullshit they need to be saved. But if people are telling them that, I can't just outright come against it. I'm just like, oh, I used to think that, but I don't think that anymore. What do you think? And hope it just keeps the door open for communication and dialogue.
Yeah, I'm the same, and in regards to that, like with children, it's like I was asked by family and friends, like, would you mind if we took them to church and stuff? And at the start, I was like, yeah, no, I got no problem, no problem with that. And then I was like, ooh, I thought about it a bit more, and I was like, and I was like, I don't want them learning about hell, or that they need to be saved, like that there's something inherently that they're created sick, commanded to be sound. I don't like that idea, and I don't like the idea that they're taught that science is a liar sometimes and all this stuff. So I was like, ooh, but then I thought, actually, what's probably better is we're going to be big travelers. We already are big travelers. We're going to be traveling around. We'll go to temples. These people believe that you get reincarnated as you remember back home with our friends and family. They believe that you need Jesus, and we're just going to pump them so full of knowledge that none of these like fear-based tactics can like grab hold, instead of telling them something's wrong.
When people say that, like, oh, are you okay with like me taking your kids to church? I'm like, yeah, are you okay with me taking your kids to an atheist camp? And you know what they're going to say? No. It's a double standard. If you want to teach my kids about Christianity, why can I talk to your kids about sex work? It's like, so I that's what I would say to them. It's like, if you want to be able to do that, then how do you feel if I do this? And if it's a no for you, then it's a no for me, because you're not actually caring about educating them and informing them of their choices. It's about indoctrinating them. And that's not what I'm not available for that.
Neil the 604 Atheist asked, if you were approached by me asking to come on my show, what would you say?
Probably, yes. I could probably check out your account and check you out. And if David vouches for you, that always helps.
I've been on Neil the 604's Atheist channel. It's great. It's good fun.
Love it.
He's a cool guy. So yeah, guys, send her an email, and if that doesn't work, send her another email.
Yes,
like,
I told David that. Like, I get so many pitches that my email, my DMs get buried, and there's some I'll see that I'm like, I totally want to do that, and then it gets buried, and then I will never find it again. I'm like, if they would just send me a follow-up email, I would see it and I could respond. So persistence pays off. Not harassment, not stalking, but persistence.
Yeah. And I tried to be very polite. I think I sent you like probably 8 emails or something. First, can you come on? Second, like, I'm sorry I missed our thing. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so sorry. And then 6 months later, I'm really sorry. Would you give me another chance? Please. And then obviously there's some scheduling as well. But yeah, I think just being polite and stuff. And Nicole's a great person. So what would you give to your younger self if you could go back in time?
Oh, my first, I was like, I just want to hug her and I just want to say, you're right. Like these desires you have and these questions you have and this knowing you have, you're right. Because I feel like all I'm doing now is fulfilling everything I wanted back then. These desires and these questions and this interest and this curiosity that I was taught to be ashamed of and to suppress. I just want to be like, you're right, honey. Listen to it, do it. You're going to be okay.
That's great. That's great. That's really great. Regarding, and I guess this will be the last question if anyone else has any super chats. Regarding your belief in God, now obviously your belief in God has changed a lot. What, if anything, would change your mind, bring you back to the old perspective you used to hold?
If Christians became the most loving people on the planet and they support sex workers and they support LGBTQ people and they support equality and they're anti-racist and like if
that's never going to happen.
Exactly.
Jesus will come back. Jesus will come back before that happens.
Yes. If you became all that, I'm in, baby. I'm in. But not a moment sooner.
I love that you start with your advocating for human rights. Like I love that. I love that that's your heart and it really comes through. Thank you. Nicole, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we finish up this episode?
I just want to say thank you for having me and thank you for hosting these conversations that I hope it makes people think and reflect and shift and shed layers of shame or hesitation and step into their true selves. And I don't know if we're gonna be reincarnated. I don't know, but like this, all I do, we do have this one life. And so I really hope that the people who are listening really go after it and live the life of their dreams because they deserve it. And I do really believe it's available.
Even if you are in a religion that maybe like does, I guess, squash some of your sexual desires, still trying to enjoy it as much as possible. Enjoy wherever you are at in life. Nothing's ever perfect. Enjoy your life while you can. That's the advice I give myself all the time. Have fun. It's an amazing life that we're living.
Agreed. Amen.
Amen. Neil deGrasse Tyson bless. Thank you, Aaron. Hope Aaron. See you guys.